Sefer Yehושע, Parak Aleph, Pasuk Zayin. Pasuk says, "Rak chazak ve'ematz ma'oid, lishmar לעשות kechol haTorah, asher tzivcha Moshe Avdi, al tasur mimenu yaminu smoil, l'man taskel b'chol asher telech." Rak is a miut, as I state in Gemara. Achem v'rak in miutin. So it's interesting. Rak chazak ve'ematz ma'oid. Ma'oid is always a riboy. Interesting diktukim in the pasuk. Lishmar לעשות, not lishmar v'la'asos, but lishmar לעשות, to keep the mitzvahs and to do the mitzvahs, kechol haTorah, like all the Torah. What's kechol haTorah? Kol haTorah, kol mitzvahs. What's kechol haTorah? Asher tzivcha Moshe Avdi, that I commanded Moshe, my servant, al tasur mimenu yaminu smoil. You should not veer from it to the right or to the left. Al tasur mimenu sounds like from Moshe, not from the mitzvahs. Okay? L'man taskel b'chol asher telech, you should have hatzlacha in everything that you do. How do we know that taskel means hatzlacha? Rashi says taskel means tatzliach. Rashi says rak chazak ve'ematz ma'oid b'Torah k'moshe u'omer lishmar לעשות kechol haTorah, as the pasuk goes on to say lishmar לעשות kechol haTorah. Anything else in the pshat in the pasuk before we start? The Metzudah says davar pashat, and we mentioned this idea a few times already, that kilulei zayis, if not for the fact that you're being mechazik in Torah, le'toil klum ban hogas am karoi. It's very nice that you're a leader, right? It's very interesting in the Jewish world. A lot of times you have Jewish leaders. Are they tamid chachamim? And could you ask him pshat in the taisus? He may be an excellent leader. He may be a great person. He may be a star example of what midas taivus and hanhogas taivus might be. He's not an amoretz. He's not a bad person, but he's not the most learned. But over here, Befrat, when we're coming into Eretz Yisrael, and we'll see why, as we spoke a few times before, but we'll see why this is so important when we're going into Eretz Yisrael. And the Laman Bavor Shmiras HaTorah Taskel. You'll have Hatzlacha if you keep the Torah properly. Let's just see what the Malbim says. The Malbim says, Rak, Neged Inyan Hasheni Shel Hadibuk Elokit Shel Lov Amak Shisi Moshe Yimach, that you have to be mechazik in the Inyan of, the same way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was with Moshe. Okay. Well, let's see I just saw a few interesting remazim. So I just want to share that before we get into things. Rak chazak ve'ematz ma'oid, the Rosh Tevis is Rachum. The Rachum Ha'amiti is somebody who's mechazik in Torah, his darf design, he'll be ma'oid Rachum on himself. And not only on himself, but for other people also. I think it's a little interesting because Mahu Rachum Af'ata He Rachum. That's Keli Van Veu. And the concept is that we should be like a Kadosh Baruch Hu, to go into, to do like Hashem. And it's just interesting that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what are we saying? Because Torah Lamed Torah Lamed Yisrael, we're learning Torah, we're teaching Torah. That's going in the ways of HaKadosh Baruch Hu by learning and teaching Torah. And then it says Chazak ve'ematz ma'oid. The Medrash says, which we'll get to a little later, also is that ma'oid is the Yetzer Hara. We know from Parshas Bereishis. Ma'oid is Eisiyas Adam. And Rak Chazak ve'ematz ma'oid, together with the three words and the number of the letters, is the same gematria as Batayra, which is Mamash Lashon Rashi. Okay. We mentioned last few shurim a concept that we say Chazak Chazak V'nis Chazek three times. The three times Kineged the Gemara that says Abba Dvarim Tzrichim Chizek. Right? Connect the four things that need chizuk, which we'll get to in a little bit also. So Rashi says, like he says, Ki ata tanchil, that's the chazak ve'ematz ma'oid. Right? So there were three things. It's just very interesting to point out that the three areas in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Yeshua that he has to be mechazik in, he was nichshel a little bit in each one of these areas, which is maybe why he needed that chizuk. Because in the Gemara in Eruvin says, now we'll get to this in Mitzvah Shem a little bit down the road. The Gemara Eruvin Daf Samach Gimel says, "Lenenash Yeshua el b'shul shebitel es Yisrael laila achas b'pir v'rivya, shenemar vehi b'yesh Yeshua b'yirichai." Right? He was mavatal Klal Yisrael one night from Pir v'rivya, which was a big time on him. And then the Gemara goes on to say, "Emesh bitalta." This is what the Malach was telling him. "Emesh bitaltam tam shel bein harbayim, va'achshav bitaltam talmud Torah." So malamet shalom va'amka shal halacha. So he was by him, and the Rabbeinu B'chai in Kamach learns that by him being mechazik, by being lun ba'omka shal halacha, that's how he was maslech in the milchama, right? So the Malach came to tell him that he was mavatal klal yisrael pirvirivya, because when the Aron is not b'mkayim, it's asa b'tashru shamita. So that's derech eretz. That's the first time that Rashi says chazak v'amatz b'derech eretz. Right, which is interesting because it's bechlal not the context of what the derech eretz is that any of them Mepharshim were saying, right? Just in I guess we'll have to see when we get up to that parsha later. By that milchama, when Klal Yisrael was in this battle from peer review, we'll see how that works. The Gemara also says, so that's I guess the chizik in derech eretz, why he needs specifically for that, and the Gemara Tamura, and he needs to be mechazik in Talmud Torah, like the Gemara Tamura says, which we're gonna. Which we mentioned many times, and we're going to get back to it again many times as well. That there were many halachas that were forgotten in the days days following Moshe Rabbeinu's P'tira, and because Moshe asked Yeshua, he says, if you have any questions, if you ever had anything that's bothering you, now's the time I can answer your questions. And he says, you wrote about me in the Torah, Nar Yeshua Benun Nar Lo Yamsh Mitei Chayil. He says, I was with you the whole time. I have no questions. Everything's good. And Yeshua had a chalisha sadas, and ended up forgetting 300 halachas, and ended up being misopik about 700 halachas, until Asniel ben Kenaz was able to be machzer pipil pulei, which we'll get back to that in a little bit also. And we also know that in the Indian of the Milchama, we mentioned in the last few shiurim also that Yeshua didn't fulfill the Milchama 100%. He didn't kill out the Shiva Umas 100%, and therefore he died 10 years younger than he should have because of this. And so the three things were Torah, Hanchalas Aretz, and the Milchama, right? And that's those are the three things that he was nichshel in. But hopefully we'll get to it, and hopefully we'll discuss what's a shtickle oimik and what's going on over here. Stam an interesting idea. This is. We're not going to be marich in this bechlal, but it's very interesting. I saw they bring from the Chuvas Marshal that he writes about different anhagas that he used to do, and one of them was that by Birkas HaTorah he didn't say the psukim of Yerecha Shamish Merecha. He said 3 psukim from the Torah, 3 psukim from Nevi'im, 3 psukim from Ksuvim, and the psukim from Navi that he would say were pasuk Zayin Ches and Tes over here. Rachazak v'mas by Lishma Laschal Torah Sher. This loyam Sefer Torah Semipich v'Gis B'Yam V'Layla L'man Tishma Laschal Kosov Boy whatever, and the Halak Tzivsicha Chazak v'Mas. There's tremendous chizik from these psukim, but he used these 3 psukim to be those psukim of Birkas HaTorah, which maybe we could find for as we go by later, but that's not the point. It's just an interesting idea that he would say these psukim as a chizik. These psukim are chizik, but he would say that as part of the Birkas HaTorah. Okay, the pasuk says, "Lishmar lasses kechol atayra shetzivcha Moshe Avdi al tasur mimenu yemenu smol." So he said there was a diuk that what's al tasur mimenu? It should be lecher mimena from the Torah. That would be, if we're talking about the Torah, we would say from it. Mimena would be from it. Mimenu means from him. Who's him? Moshe Rabbeinu. In what sense? So the Chidah brings a Yerushalmi. It's a very famous Yerushalmi in Shkalim. La'olam yira adam balashmua oimid kinegdim. When a person says, Kol omer davar b'shem Imrai, right? So the Bible says, Kol omer davar b'shem Imrai, maybe Gula Leilam, or Svasav Davis Bekever. But besides that, there's another memra that says the yira balashmua oimid negdim. You should picture and envision the person who says over that memra in your mind when you're saying over the Torah from him. And it helps for Siyata Dishmaya, and Tish Kain Rabbi Shemai, and I'll show you why. Because he brings from the Gurei Arizal, doesn't say who, but there's a sefer, Kliyakar Anach, not to be confused with Kliyakar and Chumash. This Kliyakar Anach is written by somebody, Shmuel Lanyado. He has two pirushim on going through Nach. One's Kliyakar and the other one's Klichemda. They recently redid it. Beautiful, beautiful print. It used to be, there was like shvacha print. Like hard to read, like letters flying all over the page, like not Masudan. They made it beautiful, with the Psukim and the Targum and the Rashi, and I think with Tzitz Radak also, and his Pirush on the bottom, and I guess it's more accessible today. So he writes this idea also that Al Tasir, he says Al Tasir midayitcha mi Moshe Rabbeinu shehu bal haTorah v'Rabcha. He says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling Yeshua that you should never, the picture of Moshe Rabbeinu should never leave your mind. It should always be focused on that you had a Rebbe Moshe Rabbeinu. You should always carry that picture with you wherever you go. And he says, Al Tasir midayitcha mi Moshe Rabbeinu shehu bal haTorah v'Rabcha v'tamid yiyeh be'einecha or pnei Moshe. That's Lashon Echida. That you will always have the Or Pnei Moshe in you because you're constantly thinking of him and envisioning a picture of him. And he says, L'man Taskil, he's mefared the whole pasuk like this, and he says, L'man Taskil, this is going to help you have Hatzlacha. Because really the pasuk should have said, Al Tasir Mimena. But it says, Al Tasir Mimenu, you shouldn't leave Moshe Rabbeinu, you should always keep the picture of Moshe Rabbeinu in your mind, and that way you'll always have Siyata D'Shmaya. And there's some Sefer writes a Parashat Tetzaveh, that it's a segula nefla to be matzliach in your learning. Look, make girsa, he says, to be medabik yourself and to be medabik yourself in your machshava b'Moshe Rabbeinu. And he brings a Gemara. Or sometimes it brings everything from a Gemara. The Gemara says in Erevin, I don't know, we have a lot of things coming out of Erevin since the beginning. But Ketzat Seder Mishnah, it's a brayso and Dalet on the base. Ketzat Seder Mishnah, what was the Seder Halimud of Moshe Kibbutz Torah Misinim Sar Yeshua. How did that work? Right? So Ketzat say the Mishnah. How did that work? Meaning, how did Moshe Rabbeinu teach Klal Yisrael? Moshe lamed mipei Gvura. Moshe heard the Torah from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Nichnas Aaron v'shadal Moshe Pirkei. Aaron came in, sat face to face with Aaron. Aaron came in and sat face to face with Moshe. Moshe told him over everything that Hashem said to him. So Rashi explains, Nichnas Aaron v'yashav lefnei Moshe. Aaron came in and sat lefnei Moshe. That's what Rashi says. Where's Rashi needed to say this pasuk in Yeshua for? Could have just said that he came in and he sat down. But there's an idea over here that by seeing the Rebbe teaching Torah, it's mashpia on you tremendously, a lot more than just hearing. Not only that, but it's Beferish Gemara and Hariyas also. He says that when your Rebbe's teaching, you should try to see his face. The Gemara is Ken Rebbe Shemai, and the guys are pushing by a tish to see the Rebbe. Okay, if the Rebbe is saying Torah, no, but the idea is that a person should try to see a picture of his Rebbe, and it's going to give him meaning because he's attaching himself to the picture of what his demus is, of what Mesiris HaTorah is, right? There was a story with Rosh Yeshiva that he was one time very fatracht about something, very fatumult about something. So someone asked him, like, what's the big deal? Every shverkeit that you have that comes your way, you somehow manage to pull off an answer. How come this one you're stuck? He said, because every single time, I know that the Rosh Yeshiva, I could base it on something that I heard from him, something that I understood from him. This thing, I don't have anything that had any shaykhs from Rav to do that. So I can't paskin on this, right? It always has to be based off the psak of the Rebbe. It always has to be based off an idea that's learned from the Rebbe. If you don't have that, then you can't do that. Okay. Now here's where things start getting a little bit interesting. Most of the rest of the thing is going to be based on what the Bnei Saska writes in Derech Yedei Secha, besides for a few other things. So this Nach Grada has it in the back. Yours probably doesn't. I just want to read it from inside because there was a lot of Geshmaka things. Mamish has a huge arichas on this pasuk. You're looking at this pasuk, like, what could you say already, right? It's chazak v'mas, it's chizik, Mechazik in Torah, mechazik in this, mechazik in that. Amish goes on about pages and pages and pages of Torah here, and he says so many unbelievable zachin. Well, just one. I'm not going to go through all of it, but just some of it. It's interesting. It almost looks like he goes off on tangents about giving musar about this and that, about things that were happening in his life. Apparently, things that he saw going on. He didn't like it too much, I guess. So he made it into the sefer. Okay, so he says like this: Chazak v'matz ma'oid. That's in the Vei Torah, and we explained last time that the Indian of chizik is that you shouldn't lose your grip, so to speak, on what's within your hands already. And amatz is being misamitz mechadash, to be moiled kaiches chadashim, more than what you had originally. Amatz means to be meisif more. So when we're talking about being mechazik in Torah, he already had a lot of Torah. I mean, he sat with Moshe Rabbeinu since the last 40 years he sat with Moshe Rabbeinu. He has a tremendous wealth of knowledge. He had a tremendous dveikus in his Rebbe. He had an understanding of his Rebbe's Mahalach, his Mahalach HaChaim, which we spoke about, in one of the earlier shiurim, right? There was a whole, Yeshua got whatever there was to get from Moshe Rabbeinu more than anybody else, to the point where we're going to see he had madregas, gewaltige madregas that he got from Moshe Rabbeinu that nobody else got. It doesn't say that anybody else got anything else from that, right? He's mamish in second place, or now he's in first place, right? But so he has all that. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling him, chazak ve'amatz ma'oid. You have to keep on being mezamet, to keep on trying to be mechadish, keep on being mechazik, but keep on trying to create new hasagas, create new madregas, create new things in Torah. And he says, rak is a miyut. So rak chazak. When it comes to the avoid of chizik, of the Torah that you already have, you don't have to put so much effort into that. It's just a little chizik is good. Ve'ematz ma'oid. When it comes to the hisamtus, you need to do tremendous hisamtus. And I think that the pshat, he doesn't say this, but I'm choshesh that the pshat might be, is because now we're going into Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael is a whole different league of kedusha. It's a whole different metzias. So it's going to give you, in order to conquer it and take it away from the koyches atoma properly, you're going to have to go into it with tremendous hischaskus but really a tremendous hisamtus, because it's a new territory b'chlal. This is uncharted territory. We don't know what this is all about. We don't know what it could bring. Then he goes on, he brings a medrash that says that Toiv is the Yetzer Toiv, and Toiv Ma'od is the Yetzer Hara. And he says, Zeh kol ha'adam. This is the whole story of man. To take all his kaiches to take his Yetzer Hara and to be mahapech it into his Yetzer Toiv. This grad Gemara is like this, that Avram Avinu was in complete control of his Yetzer Hara. Right? The Gemara says, Mutzasas levavoyna malafanecha. Right? The Gemara darshans that. The Gemara darshans by David HaMelech that he took his Yetzer Hara and removed it from him. Right? But he doesn't say that, but he just brings over here that the Yetzer Hara should help him in his Avodas Hashem. And the concept is that the smile is always looked at as the shvache side, and the yemen, the right side, is always looked at as the stronger side. And in a more ruchnius the gekuk, the yemen is the toiv and the smile is the tzad hara. Right? So, like we said, that the yemen is the Yetzer Toiv and the smile is the Yetzer Hara. So the job of what Yeshua is being mitzvah now from HaKadosh Baruch Hu is to take the tzad smile and to be mahavach that into the tzad yemen to the point where it's kula yemen, if we could say such a thing, right? But it's an avodah, it's a lifetime avodah, but that's what Yeshua was doing. And he says he's going to be mahabach the midas hadin to rachamim, because the smile is din, because that's where the ra is, okay? And he brings a pasuk in Tehillim, just interesting how he speaks it out. He says, Shivisi Hashem lenegdi samin, right? That part of the pasuk we all know. Ki mimini bal emait, it will never be removed from my right side. Lachen samach libi vayagol kvedi af besari yishka, and levatach he teaches that to mean besari means my entire basar. My entire basar means everything about me is going to become this hapach to the tzad yemen. So that's the pshat in chazak ve'amatz ma'od. You should take the koyach of the ma'od. Ma'od is the Yetzer Hara, and you should be mechazik that v'yistav to sein to be mehapich that into the tzad toiv. And that's what he says, that al tasir mimenu yeminu smile, because there shouldn't be any smile. You should take the smile and turn it all to complete yemen, to be mehapich it kula l'toiv. And Mamela, once you do that, then you're not going to have any shaykhs to ra anymore, and you'll be able to be, for the rest of your life, you'll be able to be completely focused on avodas Hashem. It's just interesting how he, besides Dvarav, he says like this, that when he quotes Silsi Sharm, he says an interesting thing. He says, Rak is a miyut. It's coming to be mamayit, that even when a person is being Isaac and precious from Eilam Hazah, which is really Darka Shal Torah, he says, he should go in the middle of the road. He shouldn't, when it comes to precious, he shouldn't go all the way to the extreme. Like the Rambam says, a person should not be extreme. And he says this is what it means. You should go in the middle of the road. No extreme right, no extreme left. He says, he said the Torah is the way of truth, and it's the middle of the road. But if he's a Baal Tshuva that was all the way on the left, then he has to go extreme all the way to the right. And we find that Baal Tshuvas are extreme. No, I shouldn't say that, but but there's a concept of to be mahapach the midah all the way completely to the other side, and that's the avodah that the Rambam talks about in Hilchos Deis and Shemar Prakim. That's what he says. Okay, then he goes on to a couple more dukim from him before we get into the. It says lishmar lasais, not lishmar vilasais. Lishmar is to protect yourself, that you shouldn't be to be careful not to be over in any loisase. That's sur meira. Lasais is to do an action. That's mitzvah asay. That's the rest of the pasuk asay toiv. Lishmar is missing a vav, right? Because vav, we're going to see soon, is vav is the letter that represents Maisa. 6 days a week, right? Right? And the ois yud is the letter for machshava, right? And the shem havaya, the yud is the first letter. That's the highest, because the machshava is the highest part of a person, in a sense, right? I mean, there's things even higher than that, but let's not get carried away. Also, yud represents the future. Your thoughts are much more in the, you could think about the future, mashenke and your maisim have to be either now or never. There's no, we're very limited by time, mashenke and our machshavas we're not. Okay. So he says that lishmar is to protect yourself from doing any maisim. So that's why it doesn't have a vav in there, because vav means to do maisim, and lasais is with a vav because that's asay taif. And he brings the brayso of Pinchas ben Yair that he says the hirus mevili de zrizus, the hirus is sur mera, and then zrizus is asay taif, and lishmar lasais. And he says another entirely new pshat. He says another pshat that lishmar is like v'aviv shamar es hadavar. Lishmar means to sit and wait for something. So lishmar lasais means to wait. Masa yava hamitzvah liyali v'kaimena, right? And this in Parshas Va'era by Moshe and Aaron, it says that vayetzavim to bnei Yisrael. It doesn't make. He didn't tell them anything. So how could you be mitzvah them to bnei Yisrael? So Recham HaKadosh, it says that not only was Moshe and Aaron mekayim the mitzvah in every which way possible to the T of everything that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted, but the excitement that they had looking forward to the next mitzvah, that's why he uses the lashon of tzivui. And that's the concept of lishmar. The concept of lishmar, why do you call somebody a shemer Torah mitzvahs? Because he does the mitzvahs, because he keeps the mitzvahs? Rashi Rebbeinu and David said no. He says because he sits and he waits for a chance to be mekayim the next mitzvah. This week's parasha, Lel Shimurim. What does that mean? It's a night of watching. Who are we watching? And it may not be the pshat, right? It's nishkein funny pshat. Rashi says it. It's Rashi and Chumash. Rashi says, Lel Shimurim hu Lashem. Rashi says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu shomer umetzapo lo lekayim haftachas. HaKadosh Baruch Hu was waiting for this moment to be mekayim the haftacha. Avram Avinu. Shmira means to wait with not to wait. It means to anticipate. To wait with anticipation and a longing. Masai avay liyadi v'akaymana. So Masai Shayakash Baruch Shemer Matzabel Lekam Avtachas Leitim Eretz Mitzrayim. Hu halayla hazel Hashem. Hu halayla she'amar la'Avram ba'layla hazel nigoylas manecha. On this night, this is the night that I was talking about when I told Avram Avinu that I'm going to beguile his children from Mitzrayim. That was this night. That's Lel Shimurim. That's what we're talking about. So this was the long-awaited moment that we're finally going to get out of Mitzrayim. That's what Lel Shimurim is, the lashon of Shmira. Okay. So there are a lot of questions that we asked on this pasuk. We mentioned most of them already. Why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu repeat the Azhara on Shmir Satira? He already said L'man Tishmar Lasas K'chala Kosov Boy, and after he tells him that you should do Lishmar Lasas, why does he have to tell him also Al Tasim Yoni Minu Smo? right? So the Sefer Ber Moshe from the Ozra Rebbe is fascinating Sefer. I mean, he wrote so much on Chumash. It's 10 volumes. Navi, I think he only did Nevi'im Rishonim. I think it's 2 volumes. Then he has a whole nother set of Svarim Eish Das. It's like 15 volumes. Each volume is probably close to 1,000 pages. And it's Kol Harkula. On each page it's Kol Harkula. It's clear. There's nothing a man didn't know. I heard a story that he had Ksavim on Shas, and every time he tried to print it, something happened. So I think after the third time he said to Simon Hashemayim, doesn't want to, not going to be busy with it. So he has a lot of the horrors. We got so for him. I don't always say b'shem it, but so he brings like this. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu was telling him about. HaKadosh Baruch Hu was telling Yeshua now about keeping and protecting the Torah Shebal Peh that he got b'Mesorah, b'Kabbalah from Moshe Rabbeinu, things that other people didn't have, and a lot of Zachin that are not mentioned in the Torah. And that's why it says, Lishmar Lasses Kichol HaTorah Shetzivcha Moshe Avdi. That you should do and you should keep everything that I told Moshe. And not only that, but you should keep all the things that are not written in the Torah, Ki'ilu they were written in the Torah, with the Zel B'Shmira, with the same Shmira, with the same Zahiras, with the same care and with the same protection. And he brings from the Darach Hedesach, from the Mnei Saschar, he says, Kichol HaTorah, Hainu Klalei Sehav Diktukel, V'chol Mili Dechasidi Hanechlalim B'divrei HaTorah Shetzivcha Moshe Avdi. There's so many things that are L'fnei Yeshua Sadin, that Yeshua knew because that's how he saw Moshe Rabbeinu being Naik. Now, Moshe Rabbeinu didn't push it on Klal Yisrael, and Yeshua is not either going to push it on Klal Yisrael. It was something personal that Moshe had. And he gave that over to Yeshua, and Yeshua knew about it. But it wasn't for Klal Yisrael. It wasn't a tziburi. It wasn't for the public. Right? And it's just interesting, because that's where he goes on. The Rebbe goes on and on and on and on. And on. Pages over here, talking about how people should learn how to go l'fnei Mishur Sadin. And he says that the Lecharvi Yushalayim Elu, because they were Omer Atzmam Aladin, which means that they just got to do what it says in Shulchan Aruch. That's it. Nothing more. Right? No l'fnei Mishur Sadin. He says, if you go l'fnei Mishur Sadin, HaKadosh Baruch Hu goes with you l'fnei Mishur Sadin. But that wasn't what was happening. So Me'el Lecharvi Yushalayim. And he has a whole Torah on it, but he very, very sharp from Musar there. And he says like this, and that's what he says, that everything is nichlal because leka midi l'ramizi b'raisa. Even these midas hachasidus that Yeshua got from Moshe, there's a remes to it in the Torah. Again, it could be it's Yeshua's personal Torah, and it's not something for everybody, but that itself is also merumas in the Torah. And then he says, l'mantaska b'chala shetelech, because al yedei the Torah Shebal Peh, you'll be able to understand the Torah Shebiksav. And that's how we were mafarish. We start over to Shem Shmuel. That's how the Shem Shmuel understands this Gemara. That the Gemara says that Elmalei Lechatu Yisrael Lenitin Alehem Ela Chamishchum Shetorah V'Sefer Yeshua. Because through Chamishchum Shetorah and Sefer Yeshua, if we would only have that without the Chet HaEgel, we would be able to understand the entirety of Torah Shebal Peh just by opening up a Chumash and Sefer Yeshua. Everything would be clear. Now, why Sefer Yeshua more than any of the other Sefer Nevi'im? The pashtus is kifi what we're saying now, that there was a lot of Torah Hanhagas Midas HaChasidus that Yeshua got from Moshe that nobody else knew. And if not for Yeshua, nobody else, who says anybody else knew about it? Yeshua had a lot, I'm sure Yeshua had a lot of time, and he observed Moshe Rabbeinu in places and times and in areas that other people didn't get to see. And because he was so close to Moshe in that way, he knew a lot more about his personal anhagas, about other things. That's Ilmala Lechat Yisrael. That's why the Metzias of like the Reina Torah, the pure Torah, without the Chet, would have been just Chamishchum Shetorah and Sefer Yeshua, because it's the continuation of the Hanhagas of Moshe Rabbeinu. And he goes weiter about this, and he says that he brings a Sifri like this, that there was a lot of Torah, that Torah Shebal Peh, that Moshe gave over to Yeshua, Mashla Masa L'chal Yisrael, and that he made a Mali v'Godesh of all types of Chachmas. And it's interesting, because the Mekubalim bring over here interesting things. Is Yeshua ben Nun. Why is he Yeshua ben Nun? Because he was Eichet Rashar Nun from Moshe Rabbeinu. as l'chayra this idea also, right? Because Moshe was zeichet to the Shana and nobody else was. In a certain eifin, Yeshua was makabel Moshe's madrega, agapanim, whether in the same or in a little bit smaller or a little bit less, but he was also zeichet to the Shana, and that's why he's called Yeshua ben Nun. He's not called Yeshua ben Nun for nothing, right? That's to be meramis to that as well. And but here's a very, very interesting thing. Why after Hakadosh Baruch Hu tells him Lishmar La'asot, why does Hashem have to tell him Al Tasu Menu Minu Smar? Yeah. So this is what I want to talk about. I know I was talking for a long time. This is what I want to talk about. It's as I the concept is like this. I'll say it the way he says it, and then maybe I'll say it in my own nusach. Moshe Rabbeinu was megala all kinds of saydas, all kinds of time Torah, time mitzvahs to Yeshua. Now, when a person knows the time mitzvahs, he'll say, "Well, why do I have to do this? Oh, it's only to be ma'ar mit Yerushalayim. But if I have Yerushalayim without it, then I don't have to do the mitzvah, right? If the whole point of Shabbos is that I should recognize that there's a bari in the Welt, so I could drive my car and think about Hashem the same way. We hear these svaros all the time, right? They're narish, right? Why? Because your job isn't to be smart. Your job is to listen to Hashem, right? Your job is to do the mitzvahs. So the Rebbe Moshe goes on to explain like this. He says, that's a pshat. He says, Lishmar La'asot is to do the mitzvahs. I say, do the mitzvahs, Leisa say. But then, what's Al Tasim Menu Minu Smile? Moshe was megalit him, fabulous oimik in Torah that nobody else in the world was zeichet to, right? But maybe Yeshua can take from that and say he'll become smart, right? He'll become a smarty pants, and he'll try to make make a krum alumdus to get himself out of certain things and to fa'em for certain things, to make excuses. So that's what he says. Like the Gemara says in Sanhedrin, Mipnei Malin is galut taimei Torah. The Gemara has a question: why not? Why weren't the taimei HaTorah revealed in the Torah? There were two psukim where the Torah says the reason for something, and we see that the Gedol HaOlam was nichshel in it. So you could be the greatest person. Gedol HaOlam doesn't say Rosh Hashiva. Doesn't say. It says Gedol HaOlam. We know what that was the Shlomo HaMelech. This week's parasha. The Medrash starts off with that in Parashas Va'era. Which I want to get to in a second. So that's why I told him about Tasim Menu Minu Smile. Don't start making lomdus. Don't start making chuchmas. Don't be such a smarty pants. Just do what you got to do. Kasher tzivcha Moshe Avdi. You see Moshe as an Eved. An Eved's fragish can kashas. He just does. We can all sit and philosophize. From Heinz bis Morgen, we could come up with all kinds of excuses why we should do these mitzvahs, why we shouldn't do those mitzvahs. It's not applicable. It is applicable. Do we have to do this manaseh? We'll find the lum. And I could find you a tshuva that says that you're allowed to do this, and I can find you a medrash that says that how you don't have to do that. Like over there, in the Geonim, they didn't wear tefillin, and over there, those people weren't Shemer Shabbos, right? Seder. I always say, you find your tshuva one way, I'll find you 10 tshuvas the other way, right? That doesn't matter. The bottom line is that if you're what's called today Nar L'Chiyed, that means that you don't make cheshbonos. You don't make cheshbonos, you just do what you got to do. So that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is doing with Tzavi Yeshua now. Just do like Moshe, be an Eved, and just go for it. Meaning, even if you know the reason, and a lot of times it's very hard because, I know that really my cheshbon is to be doing X, Y, Z, right? But I can't do that because Shulchan Aruch doesn't let, right? And it's a huge sign for a lot of people, right? Chazak ve'ematz. Chazak means hold on to the Torah that you already have. Ve'ematz means be mechadish new things. But don't forget at the same time, Al Tasim Menu Minu Smile. Don't veer off. Unfortunately, we know from history, and up till Mamish Hayom Hazeh, people that went off. I don't want to say off the derech or off the face of the earth or out of their minds, or whichever way they went because of the chuchmas that they did with how they twisted things or they bent things and they did things their own way. And it's Beferish Medrash at the beginning of last week's parsha. V'daber lekim al Moshe v'yomer lav ani Hashem v'er lav Avram al Yitzchak. Hadahu d'chsiv panisi ani, it's a pasuk in Koheles. Upanisi ani liras chachma v'harlalus v'sichlas. I was turning all around to see chachma, to see harlalus, to see sichlas, foolishness. Ki maha adam sheyavai achrei hamelech hashakvar asuhu. Because what could a person do after he already comes after the melech? Meaning, once HaKadosh Baruch Hu told you this is the mitzvah, this is what you got to do, this is what you got to do. There's no way out of it. There's no other options. The Rambam says that the mitzvahs are called eitzes. Why? Because this is the best way to get close to Hashem. You could sit in there and smoke your whatever and see malachim, and you could get very close to Hashem that way. I promise you, right? But that's not the mahalach. It's a beautiful thing. You could get very close to Hashem, and you could even call it dveikus b'Hashem, and you could even say that you may even be mekayim a mitzvah, but loizu hadarach. It doesn't work that way. Why? Because you have to follow v'shtein shulchan aruch. You have to follow what it says in the Torah. People say all these things, but the Gemara says, you got to do what it says. It's hard to follow a text. We don't like because the true ben chayron is that person who, through these mitzvahs, through these eitzes that the Torah gives us, called mitzvahs, that's how we're going to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu the best way possible. These are the ingredients to get to the best place possible. You'll tell me that you have a better way? That's because you're smart. Don't be so smart. Hapasuk hazen nemer al Shlomo al Moshe. This pasuk is said about Shlomo HaMelech and Moshe Rabbeinu. Al Shlomo Ketzat. What does it mean by Shlomo? Shenasan HaKadosh Baruch Hu HaTorah LiYisrael. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave the Torah to Klal Yisrael, nasan b'mitzvahs asay, mitzvahs leis asay. He gave many mitzvahs asay, many mitzvahs leis asay. V'nasan lamelech miktzas mitzvahs, and he gave specific mitzvahs to a king. Shenamar layarba lo yisusim. He shouldn't have too many horses. V'kesef his zahav, and he shouldn't have too much kesef his zahav. V'layarba lo nashim. He shouldn't have too many wives. V'loyasu levavai, and his heart shouldn't get removed from Hashem. Omar Shlomo HaMelech v'hichkim al gzeirasi shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shlomo HaMelech got up and he started being smart with the gzeira of Hashem. V'omar lo omar HaKadosh Baruch Hu le'arba le'nashim. Why did Hashem say that he shouldn't have too many wives? Lo b'shvil shel yasur levavai. Isn't it because lo yasur levavai? Ani arba v'libi lo yasur. I'm going to have as many wives as I want, and I'm going to still stay from. I think everybody does that with many averos that we do. Shlomo HaMelech did. A lot of Torah said on this. I'm not going to get into it, but we have a lot of Torah. We have a lot of excuses, right, to fend for ourselves and things like that. Shlomo HaMelech wasn't just a smarty pants. He was chacham mikol adam. Torah testifies about him. The Chazal testify about him. There was nobody as smart as him. But he got chapped in this thing of trying to be smart. On the Arba of Layasu, Amar Rabbi Seinu. This is a famous medrash. Ba'isa Shah also Yud Shabi Yarba v'nishtatchel v'nei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The letter Yud from Yarba went up and prostrated himself in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'amar Ribono Olamim, Master of the world. Lo kach amarta, didn't you say ein ois b'teilum in HaTorah l'olam? Don't you say that there's not one letter in the Torah that's going to ever become batal? Harei Shlomo oimed mevatel oisi. Shlomo is trying to be mevatel me from the Torah. V'shem hayom yevatel achas u'l'machar acheres. So the Yud says, I'm sticking up for all the other letters in the Torah, because if he's being mevatel me today, who knows what he'll do tomorrow? And that's what the Gemara says on Shabbos, that's the derech Yetzer Hara. Today he tells you to do this, tomorrow he tells you to do that, right? It just means, Avodah Zarah in that context could mean just foreign ideas. Concepts that are foreign to the Torah. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're sitting in front of a getchka bowing down to it, being makriv keteris to it. I mean, of course that's true also, but just means that once you start going down this route of doing things your own way, you could end up doing things very, very nished and still claim that you're doing the Torah mitzvahs starts there. Remember, Christianity, when they started, claimed that they were still following the Torah and the mitzvahs. Shabbos was Shabbos. Then later it got moved to Sunday, it was convenient, whatever, but I'll go upon him. Shema hayom yevatel achas u'l'machar acheres achas tisbatel kol haTorah. Omer l'HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Shlomo ve'elav kayetze v'yiyu b'teilim, v'koytzu mimcha eini mevatel. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to the Ois Yud, Shlomo and another 1,000 people like him. It's just interesting that the number 1,000 keeps on popping up by Shlomo. 1,000 wives. There were 1,000 halachas by Yehושע ben Nun also, because there were 300 that were forgotten, 700 that were sveikis. So Shlomo ve'elav kayetze v'yiyu b'teilim. Or like Elef Oilus, right? The pasuk says all the thousands of Oilus that Shlomo brought. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to the Yud, Shlomo and 1,000 like him could become battle. But Koitzim Imcha, you're a little, the Kutze Shel Yud, the tiniest part of the top of the tiniest letter, Eini Mevatel. I'm not going to be Mevatel. Uminayin Shabit Loisim in Torah. And where did that ois go? Shenamar Sarai Ishtachol Tikra Shma. Sarai ki Sarah Shma. The Yud, that Yud that complained was originally by Sarai and then went to the Yarba. And where did it go? After that, the Heichon Chazar. By Yigra Moshe LaHoshea Benun Yehoshua. Moshe by the Meraglim. By Yigra Moshe LaHoshea Benun Yehoshua. What was the Meraglim's issue? They also wanted to be smart. All these problems, most of the problems in Tanakh, many of them you can understand that they tried to do the Avodah their way. Before Matan Torah, that was perfectly fine. That's what Avodah Hashem was before, pre-Torah days. Nach Matan Torah doesn't work like that. Nach Matan Torah, you're Meshuvah. The whole reason why he's called Yeshua is because he wasn't interested in being Mevakish, that Chachma that was higher than the Torah. He wanted, Koya Shiachim Atzas Meraglim. Moshe was mispalel that he shouldn't have any chuchmas. He should just go and do his darv design from like a real Eved. And it's interesting because if you look at the Radak in Pasuk Aleph explains what Eved is because it says Moshe Eved Hashem. So Radak explains what's an Eved. Misha Samach Kol Koichai v'Kavanosai v'Kol Hashgachoisa v'Hashem Yisbarach. Somebody puts all his strengths and all his thoughts and all his hashgachas, meaning everything that happens to him, that it comes from Hashem Yisbarach. Even if he's busy with other things, worldly matters. And he brings a Gemara, weiter. The Gemara says, Oived ad Masa Yizba Lechem. Emoisa atzmai ke'eved la'adama Yizba Lechem. V'mlav lo Yizba Lechem. How does a person produce, meaning, how does a person produce bread? By working in the field. So Rashi says, there's a whole process of how to take care of your field that the bread should grow. And you were very much meshubed to that land if you wanted to grow. And if you're not going to work with it, it's not going to grow. And the Meiri over here says, on that Gemara in Sanhedrin, a person should be consistent and be kaveya himself with limud HaTorah. A person shouldn't say, and I can't work, and I'm going to be matzliach. And then he brings this Gemara of who had the melach mashal Torah, and so he says that's a pshat in this idea that in order to be matzliach in Torah, you got to put the kaiches into it and follow through. You can't just leave the seeds on the table and expect the wheat to grow. You got to put it in the right place. You can't make chuchms with it. I mean, we try and you see it doesn't work, so then you have to go back to the old-fashioned ways. Okay, I just want to say a few more quick ha'aros until we get back into this business a little bit. You done? 2 more minutes? Yeah. The Gemara says, which we'll get back to in a little bit. The Gemara says in Brachos Lamed Beis, Tan Rabbanon Arbot Shrich and Chizik, Ve'elu Hein, Torah, Masam Tovim, Tefillah, Derech Eretz. Torah and Maisim are from our pasuk, Tefillah, and Derech Eretz other pasukim. So they asked that really we could bring a ride from Derech Eretz from the pasuk Vav because Rashi understood that Chazak V'Amatz over there to be Derech Eretz. What does it mean Tzrich and Chizuk? So Rashi says Sheyischazek Adam Em Tamid B'Chol Koicha. A person always has to be putting all his koiches into these 4 things: Torah, Masam Tovim, Tefillah, and Derech Eretz. Torah is very understandable. It is especially a Sahara that tries to take a person away from learning. So Ch'tarim Pshutim, and they train in Chazal. Masam Tovim. So Masam Tovim, the Maral says an interesting thing. The Maral says that till the same Shal Tzadikim is Masam Tovim, right? As Rashi says at the beginning of Parshas Noach. What does that mean? So the Parshas is that he's going to be remembered for his good deeds, right? But the Maral says a fascinating thing. The Maral says that when a person is involved in a life of Masam Tovim, he recreates himself, and he's the fruit of his own labor. And I said that that's the pshat by a bris that you say Torah l'chupel l'masam tovim. Masam tovim we always picture in our mind helping the old lady cross the street. Every 5-year-old knows that that's what chesed is. So why is that at the end of the list, right? It's at the end of the list. Pshat is because this is the culmination of a person's whole life, is the paris that he did, is the paris that he produced in his lifetime. The Gemara says in Sanhedrin Daf Chavav Amud Beis that the Torah is mateshes keiches shel adam. So if a person puts in his keiches, it's physically draining, which we'll get to in a little bit also. And the Gemara says in the Dharma Daf Lamed Ches by Moshe Rabbeinu that Ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mashra Shechinasei Elal Gibor VeOshir VeChacham VeAnaf. Person who's physically strong. Right? Moshe Rabbeinu is physically strong. The Gemara brings that he put up the Mishkan, took it down. Him and Aaron waved thousands of Levium in one day. And that's Kashar HaYisi in Moshe Eya Imach, that you'll have this Gvura as well. That you'll have the Kayach. When you're going to be Mechazik in the Torah, you need to be physically strong. There's not a Gemara, before we go back into the interesting things that we were talking about before. The Gemara Roshana and Daf Yotes, and I believe it's the Gemara Tainus also. It says Divrei Torah ain't tzrichen chizik. Divrei Torah don't need chizik. Divrei Seifrim tzrichen chizik. Divrei Seifrim need chizik. Now, what exactly is Divrei Seifrim? It's a big shmuz. The Sefer Mitzvah Rambam, the Ramban over there, there's Maratz Chis for hours on it, right? Let's not steer to what we said before. Because what we were talking about before was the mitzvah of Talmud Torah, where there's a specific Yetzer Hara that tries to take away from learning. And the Gemara Rishon is talking about the mitzvahs and the takanas midrabanan. That needs a specific attention because people say, it's on Rabbanan, you have to care about it, right? So you have to make sure that you do all that as well. Okay, back to what we were discussing before. Again, this is another piece of the Ne'esaschar. It looks like he went on a shtickle rant on this pasuk. And many, many different things, people not doing business properly to what we're going to say now. This also, he also has a big shtickle on this, not being so smart, like doing Torah mitzvahs the way you should. And he says like this. I want to read his lashon. He says, I want to say something about this pasuk, that you shouldn't veer to the right or to the left, that you should be matzliach. To understand what the diktuk is. You already told him lishmar v'lasis. What's al tosser? You also told him lemantaskel. So it sounds like he's ovid al manas l'kabel pras. It's not a good thing. Says, I want to explain something over here. One idea that many people make a mistake about. You see, he's already talking people make a mistake. I have to correct something here. The Torah that we have from Moshe Rabbeinu is not going to change an iota, even with Nevuah and even with Ruach HaKodesh. I don't care how many Chassidim you have. The Torah doesn't change. It's Gven a Chassidish Rebbe, yeah? He wasn't a Rosh Yeshiva. I mean, maybe he was, but he was a Chassidish. But what's going on over here? What does he want? When you have it in Torah, Reuven says such and such, and Shimon says such and such. There's a Torah, there's a Shulchan Aruch, the psak is going to be X, Y, and Z. So the person sometimes will use Ruach HaKodesh to figure out a psak. And there's many stories about it. Different rabbis and different people that they use Ruach HaKodesh, right? If a guy has Ruach HaKodesh and he comes home, Labadikas Chametz, he should know where all the 10 pieces are. It shouldn't be a thing. Elamai has to make believe, right? What? I don't know. So, meaning even if he'll come out with the same psak, it's usher to do it that way. And he says, Chalila, leiladan al pi Ruach HaKodesh. This is direct quote. Chalila, leiladan al pi Ruach HaKodesh. Ki Torah, and he explains why. I wasn't ready, when I saw this line, I wasn't ready for him to say it like this. He says, Ki Torah hu davar hashava l'chol nefesh. Torah is something that's accessible for every single person. A Bal Madrega, not a Bal Madrega. An Amoritz and a Talmud Chacham, the Torah is there for you, right? the Kesher Torah is Munachas B'Keren Zavis, and Kol Misha wants to be Zeich in it, come and be Zeich in it. It's for me and for you, for Talmidei Chachamim and non-Talmidei Chachamim alike. It's the Miraj of Klal Yisrael. Don't tell me that you have a better handle on it because you're Baal Ruach HaKodesh. Doesn't work like that. Lehedyet ulanavi v'laseicha b'ruach HaKodesh. It's the same thing for a hedyet, for a navi. Now, Nevi'im are really holy people. It doesn't work like that. And he's going to say something interesting in a little bit also, we'll see. So somebody will come and say, Hine, afal pi kain, and yiseicha b'ruach HaKodesh. She'enoi kain. A person will say, but yeah, I'll use my Ruach HaKodesh. Because it's not like that. You got to tell him. The Torah is D'rechei Darchei Ubevadai HaTorah Tasa Shalav Achros. The Torah is, there's a judgment at the end of the days. The Torah is gonna, the Torah is gonna get back to whatever it is. I mean, you're trying to be fancy with your Ruach HaKodesh and stuff. The Torah is going to get back to you. The truth is ultimately going to be brought out, and the Gzela is going to go back to the original owner. I don't care what, I don't care how. It's ultimately, there is going to be an emes at the end of the day. And the same is true for any other areas in the Torah as well. But the reason is, if every person would be able to have his own psak on his own, it's a cloudy day. The Ruach HaKodesh is not working so good. The Wi-Fi is down, right? The Ruach HaKodesh is not working so good. Maybe it's a bad connection. Might make a mistake. He's saying it's a davar pashut. That's just because you have Ruach HaKodesh doesn't mean you won't make a mistake. Masha ein kain. Mi shahaylech tamid b'mishpatei haTorah layamush la'ad la'olam. A person who's going along, following along the Shulchan Aruch, as hard as it is for him, and he feels like he's schlepping along. He's miles and miles and miles, and light years and light years and light years ahead of the person on Ruach HaKodesh. You'd imagine this is coming from a literature shiva. This is Chassidus Rebbe. And he goes weiter. V'zeu sh'am Rabbi Sein Zal B'Rosh Hashanah Daf Chaf Aleph Amud Beis. B'kei Shlomo Lodem B'loi Edom. Shlomo said, I'm so smart, I want to pass him without Edom. It's a Baskel. The Baskel came out and said, I'll be Shnayim Edom. You know what the problem is? We don't pass him from Baskel either. Right? That's why the Pasuk is coming to tell you, Shal Tasu Meni Minus Smile. What if your Ruach HaKodesh woke up on the wrong side of the bed and you end up passing a Shalek Edin? No, but on Pi Kabbalah works out. You know those guys. There's no such thing. It has to be Eis Gehalten HaHalacha. It has to be that's the Mishpat HaTorah. It's a Davar HaShava L'chol Nefesh. I don't know if Kabbalah is something that's a Davar HaShava L'chol Nefesh. People do wacky things, and they say it's Al Pi Kabbalah. Show me where it says in Shulchan Aruch. It feels very spiritual to do Kabbalistic things. It doesn't feel so spiritual to follow the Shulchan Aruch. People don't like that, because you feel very stuck in the mud when you have the guy that's high in the Bari Olam, and he's davening, he claims he's davening with Kavanas and all kinds of things, and But what about Shulchan Aruch? I said that's the Hamshach HaPasuk. It's a haftacha that you're going to have atzlacha. Even when you're seichel, even if your seichel is going to try to convince you of something to do it l'shem shemayim, it could happen that you'll make a mistake even with your Ruach HaKodesh. You're still flesh and blood. You're still a person that's going to make mistakes, even if you have a very great Maila. Go and check out the Maila of Shlomo Melech. That's why the Baskel was telling him. Got to do what it says in Shulchan Aruch. Got to do what it says in the Torah. You could have Chachmas HaHaintus Morgan. Now, there are mitzvahs that are done with Ruach HaKodesh. Saita, it's an ace. Egla Rufa is with an ace. Right? But that's what the Torah says. So, if that's what the Torah says, then that's how you got to do it. You don't have another option. Should we stop here? We should go right there?
Whatever you want.
a little bit more. Okay. And we could continue tomorrow.
Can you pause for a second?
Sure. All right. The Menesascha writes in a different sefer. So on the bottom of the Derech Sefer that I have at home on the computer, they have ha'aras on the bottom, and he wrote a sefer called Vayei Bracha on Masechta Brachas on Mishnayos. He wrote a sefer Magid Taluma on the Gemara, and on the Rif and the Rush, the Rif, Rabbeinu Yoina, and the Rush on Brachas. It was regular sefer al Hashas, and Vayei Bracha is on Mishnayos. I'm not sure if it's on Shishis Seder Mishnah or just on Mishnayos Brachas. But at the beginning of Masechta Brachas, there's a Mishnah that we're all familiar with. The Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah says, what's going on over here, right? So there's a big shiloh, what's going on? The Gemara says he was really 18, and he would look like he was 70 because he got a white beard. The Yerushalmi says he was 16. Other Rishonim learn he was even younger. The Rambam says he was 70. This whole story has got to have what really happened. So he says he's Keben Shivim Shana. The Gemara says he was still young. And the day that he became the Nasi, he got a white beard. And what's the pshat? And so, mainly he's 70 years old, and he says, I never got pshat and why we have to say Kriya Shema at night, in the parasha of Kriya Shema at night. So he's an old man. What took you so long to chap it, right? If you're a bacher, like he was 16, okay. I don't know, you have to be in 30 of his marriage. That's when they learn the sugya. That's when you'll know, like, why are you, what's the shortcut over here? Right? So if he's a bacher, then it's not a question. Bacher means young. It doesn't mean bacher because he was married. The Gemara says he was married. He had to ask his wife. That's what the Gemara said. The Tosfos explains that his question was that aside from the fact, that because of the fact that this fact that he got a white beard, he still wasn't zeicha to understand. He says, why should it be because he has a white beard that he should understand? I mean, trust me, that there's many white beards out there that don't know anything. So, what's the Hava meaning because he has a white beard? So, l'chayra, the pashtus is that because what the Tosfos means is because he had a nice habit to him in the physical, that he got a white beard, you'll hope that it also affected him in the spiritual, in a sense that he'll have siyata d'shmaya in his learning as well, right? So he says he doesn't like this pshat either, because he says the Torah is leib b'shamayim he, and he says a fascinating line: "Va'afilu hanavim shenas al yadam nisim niglim bekitzvei haaretz." The Nevi'im that did great miracles all across the world, ein bekaycham v'yechaltam bepilpul haTorah v'hoitzas dini haTorah la'amida yersem nachacham. They do not have the capability in pilpul haTorah the same way that the Chachamim have. If they're getting it from siyata d'shmaya, if they're getting it from Ruach HaKodesh, they're getting it from Nevuah, it's ein doima that a guy that's sitting and learning. We always want to be that guy that's going to have a ruach. Maybe in the machzah, on Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, there's one for Panasa, one for Banim Tzadikim, and one for Ruach HaKodesh. I think the first one I always say is Ruach HaKodesh. It's cool. There's got to be something to it. Come on, it's got to be something interesting. The best guy is the guy that's not about Ruach HaKodesh, guy that's still sitting with his Gemara Rashi Taisus. That's where it's at. And he goes right and he says a very interesting thing. He says you'll think that Yeshua ben Nun was neshtakach all these halachas after Moshe Rabbeinu died. There's so many Nevi'im then. These people are going into Eretz Yisrael. There's no Nevi'im. The Nevi'im can't help. What does the Gemara say? Until Asnil ben Kenaz was machzrit bepilpuloi. He wasn't a Navi. He was the guy that was sitting by the Shtanda. He was the guy that was sitting by the Gemara. Dafke him was the guy that brought it back. Not the Nevi'im. Not the Baalei Ruach HaKodesh. That's Yeshua. That's Pinchas that weren't able to give answers until Asnil ben Kenaz brought up Pipapuloi. And this is what the Chazak Ve'amatz of what he has to do. This is what he writes. and we don't even pay attention to Baskim Nashamayim. That's not a question. Just because Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah got a Nes Ben Hashemayim, the fact that he understood a chelik in the Torah, didn't understand the chelik in the Torah, did he sit down and try to learn the sugya? You have a white beard. That's beautiful. That's wonderful. You had a nes. You did a meifist. Good. Could you answer Reb Kivega's kasha? If you can't answer Reb Kivega's kasha, sei gesund. Yeah? A nes happens to L'chor, you would say that he would be on an elevated madrega, and it could be that he was on an elevated madrega. It still doesn't mean he can't answer Reb Kivega's kasha. Reb Kivega's kasha is much more important than Ruach HaKodesh. That's what he's saying. ואפילו בבסקום מן השמיים הם משגיחים, כי הגם שזוכה לנס מן השמיים, אם כל זה ידיע סתר ועניין אחר, כי אם כפי הגיוסי, כפי הסוגה שרש נשמוסי. And then he says, he goes weiter, because the Rambam in the Pirush Mishnah says that he was, why did he say Harani Kiven Shivim Shana? Because he was miageh b'Torah so much to the point where his body got so frail as if he was 70 years old. That's a person of interest. Why? Because he physically butchered himself to the point where he's like an old man when he's only 18, when he's only 17, 18, right? So who has the Rambam to explain it this way, right? So he says that's really where it's at. Shachin hoyek ben shivim shana Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah al pi hateva sheyamar belashanos ba'isa hayoyim achatash ashkoiche v'nizrika b'seva. It says really who asked him to say this pshat. What was this davar tamua that he says he was sitting and learning, and he didn't have a pshat ben Zayma? It's because he was learning, not because he had a white beard. Who cares what he had? Who cares what kind of beard that he had, right? So that's what he says. Haray anik ben shivim shana machmas goydel hashtadlus b'Torah ukvar amru b'megillah yagati v'loy matzasi al tamen. Says Yagati Matzasi is Tam. Yagati V'lay Matzasi or Lo Yagati Matzasi? It's not true. It's Al Tam. Okay. I have a big shtickle here about the melech of Leyar B'lay Nashim, Leyar B'lay Sisim, which we spoke about before. Just to be Makatzer. In the pasuk it says by the Parshas Hamelech, it says Leitosam and Adavar she'agid l'cha yeminu smile. Smile is spelled with a vav. Sin mem aleph vav lamed. So whenever we have an extra vav in a word, it's coming to teach you that there's 6 things that it's coming to be marbe. So there are really 6 specific mitzvahs to the king, like we saw before that the medrash that a king has specific mitzvahs, and that's really the whole arichas over here. But he's going through different shittas in the Gemara, different zachin. But the point really is that the Goin says on our pasuk, it's like this: Rak chazak ve'amatz me'oid lishmar lasses k'chol Torah asher tzivcha Moshe Avdi al tasam meni minu smile. How do you spell smile over here? With a vav, without a vav? With a vav. No. So you see, why do we get a vav here? We spoke about the vav in the other pasuk, but why do we get a vav here? Because these 6 things. Why? So the Goin says Rak Chazak ve'amatz is Chazak is beguf, mitzvah saseh. Amatz is belev. That's benefesh b'loy saseh. Lishmar is also loy saseh, and lasais is mitzvah saseh. Yemin is shaloi toisef al mitzvah saseh. And smile is shalei tigra miloy saseh, because a person does the ikr action with his right hand and he holds it or supports it with his left hand. So the word smile is coming to be myra on mitzvahs loy saseh. So why do you have the extra vav here? Because there's 6 specific mitzvahs for a melech, which are, just to very bekitzer, what they are is layar b'lei nashim. Even if they're tzidkaniyos, layasa levavai, like the Gemara says, afilu isha achas hamasiris levavai is aser. Number 3 is, I'm sorry. Number 1 is layar b'lei susim. Number 2 is layashav esa'am mitzrayma separately, like the Ramban learns. Number 3 is layar b'lei nashim. Number 4 is layasa levavai according to Reb Shimon in the Gemara. Number 5 is Kesev Zavli Arbele Ma'oid. Number 6 is Levilti Rim Levave Me'echav. That he shouldn't be Balgaiva, because that's, the Ramban explains it over there also. The Gemara Yuma says, Amr Ababo, the Amar Krav, L'fnei Lazar Kain Yamad V'shala B'mishpat Urim. And the pasuk says, who is referring to the Melech? Rashi says that's Yeshua. Yeshua had a din of a Melech. Meli had to keep all these mitzvahs. So that's what we were saying before. Before we just mentioned the vart that the Yud from Yarba went to Yeshua. Wasn't going to do anything because Yeshua is going to be the Melech after Moshe. Moshe was a Melech, right? So he was going to, and the concept is that this is where we're going to tie everything together and say that the pshat is that Koyosh Yachim Yatzas Meraglim is a pshat that we're not going to make any kind of chuchmas connected the Torah, like we said from the Bnei Saschar. He could have used Nevu, he could have used Ruach HaKodesh, he could have used those sites that Moshe Rabbeinu taught him, he could have done all kinds of things. But he chose not to because he chose to be Miyageh B'Torah V'Yastar Tzayin, like Moshe told him. Okay, let's just finish up with one interesting Rashi on this Gemara that we mentioned. We mentioned the Gemara, Brachas, Lamed Beis, Lamed Beis, Arba Tzrichim Chizik, Ve'elu Hein, Torah, Ma'asim Tovim, Tfilah V'derech Eretz. Torah Ma'asim Tovim Minayin, Shenamar Ra Chazak V'Matzim Oidlish Melazach Al Torah, Chazak B'Torah, and Matzim Ma'asim Tovim. Okay, Derech Eretz. What's make this? Yeah, we asked last week, what's Derech Eretz? So like Rashi over here. Im Uman, Hu Le'um Nosoi. Im Seicher Hu L'Scherasoi. If he's a woman, if he's a craftsman, he should be mechazik in his craft. If he's a salesperson, he should be mechazik in his sales. Im Ish Mulchamahu L'Mulchamta. If he's a warrior, he should be mechazik in his wars. What does that mean? Very strange. So Rashi, what does Rashi want? I said a pshat not that long ago, and I don't know if this is correct, but I find it just to be very interesting. We have another Gemara Brachos and Daf Yud Zayin. The Gemara says, Margula bepumayu d'Rabbanu d'Yavna. The rabbis of Yavna this was a constant refrain. They always used to say, Ani bria v'chaveri bria. I am a creation, and so is my friend. Ani malachti be'ir. I work in the city. V'hu malachti basada. He works out in the field. Ani mashkim l'malachti, hu mashkim l'malachtai. I wake up early and go to work. He wakes up early and goes to work. Kishem shehu einem esgad b'malachti. The same way he doesn't encroach in my business to try to take over my business. So too I respect his work and his boundaries, and I don't encroach on his boundaries as well. Maybe I work more and he works less. But gelernt that by karbanis, that whether you do a lot, whether you do a little, as long as you're doing it for Hashem, I'll say it. What in the world does this Gemara mean? So, Geprute, Samachish can't sense, as we say in English, right? Zog Rashi. Ani ha'isik b'Torah bria ani. I, that am Isaac b'Torah, I'm a creation. V'chein chaveri ama oretz briyahu. So too is my friend the ama oretz. Ani malachti b'ir. Kolem enoicha malachti mamlachtai. My work is easier than his work, maybe. So I'll say I'm better than him, because my work comes to me easier. What does it mean? Misgadar lutvais umnusai. He tries to come and to encroach on the boundaries and tries to take away my work. V'shema tomer hadini moi she'ena misgadar b'mlachti. Maybe he's right that he doesn't try to take away my work. She'ilu hayatayv sumnasi le'hoy le'leif pasuch laharbas b'Torah k'maisi. Maybe he's always complaining about that guy that's sitting and learning. As people do, all they do is drink coffee all day, right? It's an easy life. I mean, these guys make the least money, right? But it's an easy life. You don't got to work too hard. You show up to Kail, sleep a little bit, schmooze a little bit, drink more coffee, learn, open your Gemara, schmooze a little bit, go home. That's the whole idea. It's not much, right? He's working hard. He's melach the besada. He's chopping down trees. He's teshlep. He works hard. He's out for 9 to 5, maybe more. It's not geschmack, right? So, V'shema tomer hadini Moshe einay misgad b'mlachti. Shilu v'tayv zumnasi lehoy le'leif pasuch laharbas b'Torah k'mais v'yamam etvein le'schar. But maybe he's going to come to Kailul. He's just going to open up the Gemara and he's not going to do anything, right? And he's not going to get schar. Shoninu sheyesh le'schar l'mam et k'may l'marba. He gets schar even for the little bit that he learns, the same as a person who learns a lot. What does this mean? This whole thing is bizarre. This whole thing is very strange, right? But I think we have to look at. I think we're missing the boat over here. The same way we were saying before. L'man tishma lasas kachol shetzivcha ma'isha avdi al tavsa mimanu yeminu smah. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave you a job. You may be a plumber. You may be a rabbi. You may be in the kollel. You have to be mechazik in your derech eretz, in your thing, whatever it is, to be the best that you could. Don't try to say, I'm going to be like, Yena guy, I want to be like him. Yena guy, I want to be like him. Yeah. A rabbi one time said he has a whole kehillah full of Yenamites. He said, what do you mean? He says, Yena, I don't have problems. Yena has problems. Yeah? That's what they say to Yoda, see Yena. Because you're always looking at Yena's car, not yours, right? So, but I think it stems very nicely with this, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu created a Welt and put us here with a cheshbon. What the cheshbon is? Ain't nobody knows. If they tell you they know, they definitely don't know, right? Amal, there was a Navi. Amal, even nowadays, maybe, after people have rebellion, I don't know, right? But the Zach is like this. You have to be typhus your umnus. You got to take your kaiches, whatever you have, take it and run it. Just like Rashi says by Talmud Torah. You have to be mechazik b'chal kaichai. Your umnus is the same thing. And that guy is going to say, I'm any less than you because I'm not learning? Or because he gets this amount and I get Yena amount? Try doing Yena's work. You're only going to get the exact same amount of money that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants you to get. Now, if somebody offers you a better job, go for it. There's no reason not to, right? But the Nakuda is you have to know where you're at. And you have to be mechanic. Derech Eretz doesn't mean to chop down more trees. Derech Eretz means the concept of why HaKadosh Baruch Hu put me here, right? What am I doing here? Whatever I'm doing, I got to do it all the way. On Kain Chuchmas. You're Vaidra and Eved Hashem in this also. The concept of an Eved Hashem is that I'm doing it as an Eved, not with Chachma. I'm not trying to be outsmart, I'm good at what I do, right? Let's say I decide I'm going to become a Major League Baseball player. I don't have a shot in my life to do such a thing. What's the Havamina? I don't know how to hold a baseball. I don't know how to throw a baseball. I don't know how to catch a baseball. I don't know how to wear a glove. I don't know how to run the bases. I don't know how to swing a bat. So what's the Havamina? There's so much false expectations out there. You have to peel away all these layers of falsehood in order to find the MS. That's what being mechazik and derech eretz means. Because we get very, get down on ourselves and we feel very bad about ourselves. Like, Yena makes so much money. Yena is so much tzech. What about me? When's the day that's going to come that I'm going to be matzech what I do? Today. Because you're going to man taska. That's it. That's where it's at. And you could be me, and whatever it is, and try to do it. You could be missing the boat entirely. Don't do it with chuchmas. Do it because that's right for you. Outcome.